Hi everybody, my name is Shelby. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. I'm glad y'all are with me. Before we get into today's video, I do want to first off say make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already so that you can be notified whenever I post new videos, and I would love for you all to join in on the fun. So today's video is going to be the May mid-month wrap-up video, so we're going to get right on into it. So if you haven't noticed, this is a new setup. I have moved rooms in my house. I switched rooms with my daughter because my room was bigger, and I'm eventually going to have my two daughters sharing a room, and I figured that would be better for them if they had the bigger room when it's just me and I can take the smaller room. So I switched rooms. Still kind of trying to figure out where in here is going to be the best setup for filming videos. Today we're just going to try it here. I mean, it's okay so far. I've got my desk behind me. I did set up all my art little prints from like book boxes and stuff up here, which I really like, and just all kinds of bookish stuff. But yeah, so we'll see if I like this. I may switch it up into change it to where I'm sitting like in front of a bookcase if I can, although I don't have all the bookcases that I want in here yet. It's just going to be a work in progress for a little bit. So enough about that. Now we're going to get into the books that I read. I have had a fantastic reading month so far. I'm like really hitting my stride now. Now I am filming this the day before that I'm supposed to go back to work because I'm currently on maternity leave, but that last day is today, unfortunately, and then I go back to work. So we'll see if my stride continues with going back to work. I think it should still be okay because for the most part, depending on the day that I have with like work, I am usually able to listen to audiobooks somewhat throughout the day while I'm working. Now it's not always the case, but that's how I've been able to read a lot, is because I can listen to audiobooks while I'm at work. So I think I should be able to continue my stride, but I don't know how things are gonna go with me now having two children that I'm having to like cart around and take to parents and caregivers, and you know, I'm by myself now. I'm gonna be a single parent. I am a single parent, so I don't know. We'll just see how things play out. But anyway, I have been averaging for the past couple months, like the first half of the month, I've been averaging about like 7 books in the first half of the month. This month, the first half, I read 12 books. So like I said, I'm doing really well for May so far, and I've been really enjoying all the books that I have read. Some of these I do actually have physical copies of them, but I'm just gonna put up like pictures like how I usually do, just because since I've moved, I have like all of my books are all scrambled up together and I have no idea where these books are at. So let's get into all of these books. So the first book that I read for May is going to be the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Adams. This is the first book in the Bromance Book Club series that everybody has loved. I have not read this before and I wanted to give it a go. So this is a marriage and trouble romance. This is about our hero, who is also a sports romance. He's a baseball player, if I'm remembering correctly. And him and his wife get into a fight and they end up kind of splitting up because he finds out that she has been faking orgasms their entire marriage. And that just kind of blows up about them not being honest with each other. And he is really wanting to fix his marriage and win his wife back. And at the beginning of this book, his teammates have kind of found out a little bit about what's going on, or at the very least they know something's going on with him because he is not acting like himself and he's just like drunk and just not having a good time. So they decide to let him join in on their book club that they have created, which is the Bromance book club, where them and like all these guys read romance books to help them woo their women. So they give him an assignment, they give him a book to read, and it happens to be a historical romance. And they're like, hey, read this and talk to us about what you're learning from it, because this is going to teach you how to be a good husband, how to take care of your wife, how to woo your wife, and show you what your wife is actually looking for in a partner. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I think this was totally worth the hype that surrounds this book. Now, I've heard some of the other books in the series aren't as good as this one. I do plan on continuing the series because I have 2 more books. I have this one, a physical copy of this one. I think I've got 2 other books in the series physically. But I just want to kind of see how the rest of this plays out. I did like some of the side characters, so I'm interested to see how they get their HEAs or like where their story plays out. But overall, I did really enjoy this one. Oh, and then the steam on this, I would consider the steam about like medium-high steam. Then I read The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This is the 2nd book in a series, which I did not realize that when I started this. I just heard really good things about Elizabeth O'Rourke and I decided to pick this one up. I did really enjoy this one, just FYI, just right from the get-go. So I will probably be going back to reading the 1st book, although I don't think it hindered me too much. It just kind of spoils a little bit of the 1st book, but I think it'll be fine because it's a different couple. So this is about our heroine, who is a like pop star, rock star, something, and she is joining her ex-boyfriend and his family on their vacation. Now, this was kind of weird to me from the beginning because I was like, why would you go on vacation with your ex-boyfriend and his family? But he apparently just somehow convinced her to come, and he's going to use this as try to be an opportunity for them to get back together, but she does not want to get back together with him like at all. So when she arrives, they're going to vacation on Hawaii. So when she arrives there, his family's there, but he is not, and he's going to be late coming in. So it's his family, his mother, his father, and his brother. Now her and the brother do not get along. She thinks that he thinks she's like garbage and that he doesn't like her. So they don't really get along. They butt heads a lot, but she's there and she's trying to help make the mom happy because the mom is the one that's really wanting everybody in the family to like get together for this vacation. So they end up doing a bunch of like these excursions and hiking and different things together that the mom has kind of set up for the family to do. But then once they start to go to these places like hiking and whatnot, she kind of realizes that maybe she thought that the whole family would want to do these things, but then they don't, and that she can't really like do all these like super crazy things. So our heroine and the brother end up doing all these excursions and hiking and whatnot, just the 2 of them, just to please the mom. And so they start to get a little bit closer and finding out a little bit more about each other. The brother is a doctor, and he works in Somalia, I think. It almost sounded kind of like one of those like Doctors Without Borders kind of thing, except Somalia is like a war-ravaged country, and it's very, very dangerous to work there. But he does this kind of to prove that he's better than his father, who I think is also a doctor, but only is a doctor because of like the prestige and the power, whereas he's like, I'm gonna be a doctor to actually help people. And then we also find out a little bit more about our heroine, and her story kind of reminds me a little bit of Kesha. If you're familiar with what, like in the news, what was going on with Kesha, not exactly the same with like I think she was like also sexually abused by her manager, but just the abuse that she had from her manager. Our heroine of the story has a somewhat similar situation in regards to abuse by her manager, and not being able to be who she wants to be and be the artist she wants to be and sing songs and just doing anything for herself. So we have all that situation kind of going on too in this book. But this was really good. I gave this 4 stars. I did really enjoy this. I would say the steam on this is pretty medium steam. So I will be going back at some point to read the first book of the series. And then I've heard the 3rd book of the series is going to be coming out soonish. So I'll probably get to that at some point too. Then I read Meet Cute Club by Jack Harbon. This is I would almost call this a novella, or at least a very, very short book. This is a male-male romance about we have one guy who is in charge of a book club, and he loves reading romance novels, and his book club reads romance, called the Meet Cute Book Club. But he's losing members and he's feeling very downtrodden about this. And then our other hero from the story is he works at a bookstore, and he thinks it's weird that this guy likes reading romance, but he's kind of interested in him. And yeah, so that's kind of the start of the story. I'm gonna be honest, I listened to this on audio and I was pretty bored with this book. So since it didn't really capture my attention, I don't remember too much of the story and what happened. Just know that they at first don't really like each other, but they start to develop feelings for each other and eventually get together. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars because it was okay. Like I said, I was pretty bored with this, and I felt like our 2 main characters were just too similar to each other. Like I kept getting them mixed up during like when I was listening to this on audio, and I couldn't remember which person we were talking about. I would say this like medium steam, and there are trigger warnings for death of a grandparent in this. Another thing that I was seeing some other reviews of this on Goodreads is some people were mentioning, like, when this first came out, it was very much heavily marketed as like an enemies to lovers kind of story, but I wouldn't really consider it that, because that only happens like at the very, very, very beginning of this book, and then they're not really, and even then they weren't really enemies per se to begin with. The next book I read starts the books that I read during the Mafia Romance readathon, which I did post a vlog about that last week, so I will put that up in the cards. So the first book is going to be Marrying the Mobster by Victoria Vale. This book is about, we're in, I want to say Florida. I don't know. I've read a lot of Mafia romances and some of them kind of get mixed up in my head. But this is about our heroine, and her father owes a debt to the cartel. And to ensure that her father pays the debt, the capo, I guess, the person in charge of the cartel, takes her as collateral. And is like, okay, I'm going to take her for 30 days. You have 30 days to pay off your debt to me. If you cannot pay your debt in that time, then you will die and your daughter will die. And during those 30 days, I can do whatever I want with your daughter. So she is kind of like the captor-captive scenario. But in the meantime, he is working with the Russian Mafia, and the head of the Russian Mafia, like they're working together to kind of try to form somewhat of like an alliance. The leader of the Russian Mafia is very much a like family man. He values family and marriage. So the capo of the cartel, he is not married. He doesn't really have much of family, and he has reasons for why he doesn't want to get married and have a family, because he kind of grew up in the cartel and he doesn't want to expose those type of things to like children, like if he had children, and he just doesn't want to get married because he doesn't want to fall in love. He very much wants to stay like a lone wolf kind of character. But in order to form this alliance, he needs to kind of get married. And the Russian mob leader has a daughter, and he's like, hey, why don't you marry my daughter? And that'll, you know, seal our alliance with this marriage. However, not only does our capo not want to get married because of the reasons I've already said, but he also doesn't want to get married to this Russian guy's daughter because he thinks she is super boring, like has no personality. He is not attracted to her, very boring. He can't have a conversation with her, just does not want to get married to her. But the Russian guy is pretty expectant about him getting married because of, like I said, he values family and marriage. So he's like, well, I've got this girl who's my captive that I can do anything I want with her for these 30 days. So I'm just going to marry her, and then she's just going to stay with me either forever or until this whole contract kind of thing is up with her father and I kill her. So they get married, much to the chagrin of our heroine, because she does not want to get married to this guy. In fact, she repeatedly, there's like at least a couple places where she tries to kill him because she does not want to be his captive. But then she kind of like, by the end of it, she does kind of embrace the life, and gets very brutal with, like violent, brutal with some people at the very end of this because of things that happen. But I give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. As with pretty much all Victoria Vale books, this is a very high steam book. Yeah, so the next book I read is going to be Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geissinger. This is the first book in the Queens and Monsters series. This is about our heroine at the very start of the book. I believe her name's Nat, if I remember correctly. At the very start of this book, she is very depressed because it is the anniversary of her fiance going missing and the anniversary of her would-be wedding, because her fiance went missing the day before they were supposed to get married. And it's been 5 years, so she lives in California, and there is a law in California that states if a person has been missing for 5 years, then they are declared legally dead. So she, like I said, is very depressed. She ends up going out with her friend Sloane, who is trying to raise her spirits a little bit and be like, hey, you know, you've held a torch for this guy for so many years, you know, I'm sorry, babe, but let's try to move on. Like, you know, I'm here for you. And they end up going out and they meet this guy, this very attractive and mysterious guy, who Sloane, her best friend, who is kind of like almost like the female equivalent of a womanizer, like a man, I don't know what you would call that, but she likes to get around and she dates lots of guys and sleeps with lots of guys, and so she's like, I'm gonna go talk to him because I definitely want to sleep with this guy. And he rejects her, which she's not a fan of. And they end up finding out that he has just bought the house next door to Nat, and so now he's going to be her next door neighbor. And then we get a lot of other stuff happening. We find out that he is actually a part of the Mafia, and he is there next to Nat's house for reasons, because he was sent to kill her, but we don't know why. But he decides that he's so attracted to her and he's very interested in Nat that they are gonna start a relationship, and you kind of see how that goes. I love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought this was a great start to the series. I've heard so many good things about this series, and I think this is fantastic. I loved our two characters banter together. They had such great chemistry, sexual, and then just in general, like their wittiness and how they could play off of each other was just fantastic. And the same for like pretty much all the rest of our characters throughout the rest of the series. I can definitely understand why everybody loves this series. And I also loved our heroine. Even though she's very upset at the beginning of this book, she is definitely not a meek heroine. She's a very strong person, and I love that she's able to stand up to this very alpha male. And again, that's also going to be true for all the rest of the books. I think the Queens and Monsters title of the series works perfectly, because all of these heroines in these books are just queens, and then we have our monsters, these supposedly bad guys, very alpha male, top dogs, and they're put on their knees by these heroines, and it's fantastic. I love it. Then I read Killian by Natasha Knight. This is part of a series. I'm not sure which book, what number of this in the series it is. This is going to be another one that I got kind of bored with and I didn't really connect very well, so the details of it are a little bit fuzzy. But it's very similar to Marrying the Mobster, where our heroine, her brother stole drugs from the Mafia, and so Killian is in charge, and he is there. He's going to kill her brother because he stole from him. But then she decides she's gonna offer herself up in exchange and be like, hey, I'm gonna offer myself so that you don't kill my brother. And he's like, okay, but you're gonna be with me again, like the last book or the prior book that I talked about, for 30 days, and I'm gonna get to do whatever I want with you. This is somewhat of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I don't think it's a very good Beauty and the Beast retelling. They get together and end up falling in love. Like I said, this one wasn't super memorable. I was kind of bored with it. I thought it was just a little bit too similar to a lot of other Mafia books, so there wasn't really anything to make it super stand out. The author did try to put in some backstory to make you care a little bit more about our characters. With our hero, something happened to his sister, and our heroine, with things that happened to her brother, past abuse, and our hero's sister died. However, I wasn't super invested in this book and these characters, so I didn't really care. I gave this 3 stars because it was just kind of meh. The steam on this was high. And yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say for that one. Then I read Mafia Mistress by Mila Finelli, I think is how you say her name. This is the first book in the Kings of Italy series. I've heard so many people talking about this book. So this is about our heroine, and her father is in the Mafia in Canada, I think. and she's getting set up to get married to the son of a leader of the Mafia in Italy. And she's very upset about this because her father had promised her that she was going to get to go to college, and he kind of like backs out on that, on his promise, because she's supposed to get married. So she gets flown out to Italy to meet her would-be husband. And this is all to, again, with arranged marriages in Mafia romances, it's to form like an alliance between this group in Canada and the Italians. So she does not want to get married to this guy. And then she finds out that her fiance doesn't necessarily want to get married to her either. And you kind of find out why. But she also has an insane attraction to her fiance's father, this older, sexy fox of a man, and they kind of end up getting into a relationship. Thus why the title is Mafia Mistress, because she ends up becoming the mistress of the father. And this was really good. I gave this 4 stars. This is very much not necessarily like a total like love story. This was more of a lust story. The steam on this was very high. I really enjoyed this. Oh, there are trigger warnings for claustrophobia. Our heroine has claustrophobia from, I don't remember what it stems from, but there is a scene where our hero is pissed off at her and he throws her in his dungeon at his castle, and she kind of freaks out about that because of her claustrophobia, so just beware. Then I read Carnal Urges by J.T. Geissinger. This is the 2nd book of the Queens and Monsters series, and so far I'm reading in more into this series. So far this is my favorite of the series. This is about Sloane, who was the best friend of our heroine from the 1st book, and she is going to visit Nat and Cage. I think he was the hero from the 1st book, because they have like gotten together, and so she's coming to visit them when she gets kidnapped. So she gets kidnapped because she inadvertently kind of starts a war between the Russians and the Irish. Now they don't really like each other before this, but Sloane, like I said, inadvertently, it's not really her fault. But anyway, so she gets kidnapped by the head of the Irish mob because he is doing it in revenge and retaliation for the Russians killing some of his people. So what happened, and this happens in the 1st book, there's just a little scene of it. What happens is Sloane is at a restaurant with, I believe she's with a Russian guy, and there's some Irish mob people at this restaurant too, and they make some remarks to Sloane about how gorgeous she is, but not necessarily in the nicest way. So then the Russians get pissed off about this and kill those Irish guys. And so that's how this whole war thing started. So Declan, who is the leader of the Irish, he is pissed off about his men getting killed. So that's why he ends up taking Sloane. But his plan kind of backfires because Sloane is not the best captive. She gets on his ever-loving nerves and talks back to him constantly and is like, I freaking love Sloane and her confidence. And she's like, you're terrible. I'm gonna get away. What, you know, I can't even describe it. She basically just annoys him to death. And I call it like she annoys him into falling in love with her. And she ends up charming all of his men. Like, he tells them like, hey, don't let her do all these things. Don't let her out of sight. And then she just kind of like talks to them for a little bit and like compliments them to where they're like basically eating out of her hands. And I would say, I think a lot of his men are more loyal to her than they are to him and would like give their lives to her with only being with her for just a little bit. And it's just fantastic. I loved it so much. Again, the banter between these characters, how Sloane is just a badass woman who she's confident and she's not afraid to stand up for herself and talk back to this alpha male. And I just absolutely love this. I give this 5 stars. This is probably one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. It was so good. There's so many good quotes from this book. It's amazing. So this is very high steam. There are trigger warnings for past miscarriage, but it's only mentioned, like, it's just a brief little snippet, so just know that going in. So that was the last book that I read for the Mafia romance readathon, but since I started these like series for it, I've just still kind of been in like a Mafia mood. So I continued on with a couple of the series that I'd started. So the next book that I read is going to be Mafia Darling, which is the second book of the Kings of Italy series. So this book picks up right after Mafia Mistress ends. So Mafia Mistress does end on a cliffhanger. So that's why I wanted to go right into this one, because I wanted to know what happens. So I'm not going to say too much about this one. Just know that our hero makes some mistakes in the first book and does some things that makes her upset and mad at him and want to leave him. So this book is more so about him somewhat trying to make up to her for that and to win her back, because he realizes that he doesn't want her to leave and he wants to keep her. And their relationship kind of forms a little bit more. I gave this one 3 stars. I did not enjoy this one as much as the first one, mostly because a big part of the reason why I didn't like this one as much is because the hero does do some groveling, but I don't think he does enough groveling, just for like how he treated her. And even then, his kind of groveling isn't necessarily groveling. It's more so him being all like, well, I don't really care. You don't get a choice. You're going to be with me. And it's okay because I know secretly deep down you do want to be with me and you are lust after me and you're in love with me. So the fact that you keep trying to like push me away doesn't really matter, because we all both know in the end that we're going to be together, kind of thing. And I just didn't really care for that. I can't even remember if he ever apologizes to her. If he does, it's pretty far towards the end of this book, if he does at all. Like I said, I don't really remember. So that just kind of irked me, and I didn't really like that. There are trigger warnings for violence. There's some bloody scenes in this book, and the steam on this is pretty high. But yeah, so there is going to be another book coming out in this series, and I can't remember what it's called. I'm kind of half and half on if I'm going to continue with that. Then a non-Mafia romance. Then I read The Wrong Game by Kandi Steiner. I have not read a Kandi Steiner book before, and Kandi Steiner is an author that I have been wanting to try out for a while, and this book was on Scribd, which is an audiobook subscription service that I do. So I decided to pick this one up. This is about our heroine, and at the start of this book, she finds out that her husband has been cheating on her, but she doesn't get to tell him that she knows this. She has a plan that she's going to leave him, but before she can tell him this, he tells her that he has terminal cancer and that he is going to die. So she ends up taking care of him until he dies, and she's just living with this, that he cheated on her, and this like grief over the entire situation. But she's also a diehard football fan of, I don't remember what team she loves, but she has bought season tickets to this team that she's a fan of, and like I said, I don't remember. And she has extra tickets, and her friend is like, hey, you should use this as an opportunity to like get back on the horse, so to speak. So she decides that she doesn't actually want to date to fall in love again, because she doesn't want to, she has problems with trusting somebody that she has given her heart to because her husband cheated on her. So she doesn't want to fall in love, and she decides she's going to take a new person with her to each game. So the first person that she ends up taking with her is this bartender at this bar that she goes to, and he is kind of the exact opposite of her in regards to, he wants to find love. He is fairly attuned with his emotions, and he wants kind of that fairy tale kind of scenario because like his parents have been together forever, and he wants the kind of love that his parents have, this long lasting kind of love, and he thinks that she could be it for him. But of course, then he kind of finds out that she's like, no, I'm not interested in a long-term relationship. I don't want to be with you further. So there's a little bit of hiccups there, but these two characters do eventually get together. I really enjoyed this one. I gave this 4 stars. This wasn't as an emotional of a story as I've heard that some of Kandi Steiner's books can be, or as angsty of a story as I've also heard some of her books can be. So I'll probably be reading some other books from her just so I can kind of get, especially since I enjoyed this book, but so I can get a more wider variety feel for how she writes and see how those go. There are trigger warnings, like I said, for death of a spouse, cheating, although our 2 main characters don't cheat on each other. It's just that her husband had cheated on her in the past, and cancer. And this is pretty high steam as well. Then I read Heir of Fire, which is the 3rd book of the Throne and Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This, if you didn't know, is a YA fantasy series, and I am reading this for the SJM-a-thon, reading-a-thon that is taking place throughout the year. So this one continues our journey with Selena, and our last book, she was the King's Champion, and in this book, she is being sent away to another country, or another area of the country, I can't really remember, but when she's being sent away, she decides she kind of wants to learn a little bit more about her magic and ways to basically try to take down the king, because the king is her enemy. So she seeks out to try to find Maeve, who is a Fae queen, and she gets partnered up by Maeve with Rowan, who is going to be a featured character for the rest of the series, I'm told. This is the last book. I have read this one before, but this is the last book of the series that is going to be a reread for me because I haven't continued the series prior to this. So like I said, I'm told he is a major character for the rest of the series. But Maeve pairs her up with Rowan, and Rowan is tasked with teaching her magic, basically. And then there's some other kind of stuff going on, especially at the castle with Dorian and Kale, who were main characters that were featured in the prior books of the series, but they've got some other stuff going on. Some secrets that they're dealing with, and just things that they're figuring out with like some rebels and whatnot. I gave this 4 stars. I enjoyed this one more so than the prior books of the series, and I also enjoyed this a little bit more than the first time I read this. This has a lot of character growth and character development in this book, which I'm hoping continues, because I still feel like Selena has a ways to go with where I think she can be. There are trigger warnings for death of loved ones. I'm not going to mention who. There are no specific, like, totally specific, like, deaths in this, but like backstory wise deaths of loved ones is kind of what I'm leaning towards. And there is like, this is YA fantasy, there's like basically no steamed in this. Then the last book that I read for the first half of May is going to be Savage Hearts by J.T. Geissinger. This is the 3rd book in the Queens and Monsters series, and this is about Riley, who is Sloane's sister, and Sloane is wanting her to visit because Sloane is like, hey, I might be getting engaged. And Riley is like, what? Oh, you're not already engaged? And she's like, yeah, I can't really decide. But if I do decide that we're getting engaged to Declan, then we're going to be getting married like the next day. And I want you to meet him. So Riley is not a really big fan of her sister Sloane, but she's going to visit her anyway. And in the process, she ends up meeting this assassin, who I think he's known as like the Black Death or something. I'm trying to remember what his nickname is, but he is our hero of the story, and he is actually tasked with going and trying to assassinate Declan, but he keeps getting sidetracked by Riley, and they meet because it's very funny. When he first sees her, he thinks that she is a prostitute for Declan, and he thinks that Declan is an asshole for parading around this prostitute mistress person in front of his girlfriend. Because Sloane dressed her up in this like really sexy attire that Riley's not comfortable with. So he comes to her and gives her money and is like, it's okay, you don't have to live this way anymore. And she's just like, what? Like, what in the world are you talking about? So that's how they meet. And they keep kind of talking with each other because he's very interested in her, and she's like very interested in him as well because he's very mysterious. And she's like, I'm not a prostitute. But then we also kind of end up having this situation where there is a shootout thing that happens, and our hero ends up having to take care of our heroine, and that's kind of where more of their relationship and feelings start to develop. I gave this 4 stars so far. This is my least favorite of the series, but I mean, I still give it 4 stars. It's still really good. I still love the banter between these 2 characters. I don't know. I just didn't fall in love with them as much as the characters from the first 2 books of the series. But it still has those same scenario where Riley is just an amazing queen and I love her. And we have our alpha male who would just do anything for her, would just is on his knees for her, and I think it's fantastic. So that is going to be at the end of this video. Those are going to be all the books that I read in the first half of May. Make sure you comment down below with some of the books that you've been reading this month and what you've been enjoying. I would love to hear from you. Let me know what I should be reading, and stay tuned for the end of this month / beginning of June, when I'm going to post my end of May wrap up. But yeah, so like I said, if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye guys.